Welcome back, this is the Hero Informer, and with the new release of this next issue of this all-new Venom, there has been a lot of controversy as we finally get to see who it is, and people do not like it. But me personally, dare I say, I don't hate the idea and new identity of this all-new Venom. But as we finally move over and get into it, we pick up with Joe Robertson, the head of the Daily Bugle. Now this is interesting for a couple of reasons, because up to this point, he's really the last suspect of the people who could be Venom, or at least that's what the comic is trying to pull the narrative of, because all the other suspects such as Luke Cage, Rick Jones, Madam Mask among others, yeah, they have all been ruled out. But for now, we see him go to MJ's and Paul's apartment, because he has a couple questions and things that he has learned that he needs answers to, specifically about Dylan Brock, because since the beginning of this entire storyline, he has been the one who has compiled and made the list of all these new Venom suspects. But not just Dylan, he also asked about Mary Jane, who becomes very important later on, so just keep her in the back of your head. For now though, we see him reveal that he knows that Mary Jane was, or currently still is, the new vigilante Jackpot, which, she isn't the best at keeping her secret identity hidden, in the same vein as Peter Parker himself as Spider-Man over the years is, many people being able to figure out who he is in some way or fashion. Either way, with Rob figuring out that she is Jackpot, he suspects that there's even more she is hiding. And speaking of other secrets and symbiotes, we finally move over to the heart of New York, where a giant symbiote battle is going down, where we see specifically Sleeper, who at this point we know underneath the Sleeper symbiote is Rick Jones due to the cliffhanger of the last issue. But it's not like a situation with Venom where, the host and the symbiote have equal say in what they do. Here, it's more like Rick Jones is giving his body away for the Sleeper symbiote to take control and do whatever it needs to do, with the symbiote even going as far as to wipe Rick Jones's memory after each use, which even he thinks is ethically dubious. Though, as he is able to subdue Madam Mask, yeah, the main big bad that they were fighting before, M.O.D.O.K, comes back into the field, instantly obliterating the Sleeper symbiote and Rick Jones alike, and leaving them vulnerable. But they're not the only symbiote left on the field, as Venom, who was previously downed themselves before, is back up and ready to go, attacking M.O.D.O.K by literally shoving its hands and fists up his nose, which is disgusting and has to be super painful, which non-surprisingly it is, and it absolutely ticks M.O.D.O.K off, as he essentially goes on to say, forget the plan of taking over AIM, right now I just want everyone here to die. And instead of just taking out the symbiotes themselves, he completely obliterates the building they were standing on, making himself, the symbiotes, his fellow villain Madam Mask, and all the other civilians plummet and fall to their death. Thankfully though, the symbiotes on the field are able to get ahead and save the hostages, casting webs and stopping their fall so nobody falls and splatters on the New York pavement. But it seems like the Sleeper symbiote isn't as experienced as Venom is, eventually getting caught in M.O.D.O.K's blast, rendered incapacitated. And this is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because the symbiotes have almost a father and son relationship here going on, Sleeper being another child or spawn of the Venom symbiote. So of course the well-being of Sleeper is more personal to Venom itself. As with everybody saved and stopped for now, Venom goes on to make a pretty unusual play, transforming its feet into jet boosters almost, but of course not like Iron Man or anything. There's no fire or propulsion or anything in the symbiote, so instead, to boost its speed and catch Sleeper, it literally shoots itself, shooting its own mass and symbiote body to boost itself forward, as even M.O.D.O.K sees this and comments, do you see how deliberating it is to have a family? The stuff you're shooting, that's not just wasteful webs, is it? You're literally spraying your own substance like a water cannon, just to exceed to terminal velocity and catch up with your worthless spawn. Which in the end actually does work, even for how unusual and unorthodox this kind of method is. Venom is able to catch Sleeper, though it does leave the Venom symbiote much weaker and noticeably more skinny and weirder looking as well, turning the Venom from a, giant beefy muscle wall to kind of skinny and almost reptilian looking. It's kind of weird. But this is bad because, the main bad guy, M.O.D.O.K, very powerful in his own right, is still on the field. And with Sleeper not being that powerful and Venom being weakened, in a giant fist fight, there's not much they can do to defeat M.O.D.O.K at this very present. So once more, they decide to do something pretty unorthodox. This time it being Sleeper who has come up with a plan. Venom calling out saying, yeah, you've got a big brain and a big skull, and it does big things, but the only thing we see when we look at you is a big target. And just like that, the Sleeper symbiote jumps off Rick Jones to its new host, M.O.D.O.K himself, which is a pretty game-ending move if you think about it. Even if you have an opponent stronger than you, if you're a symbiote, you can really just jump ships and take over that opponent, and instantly you're just as powerful as the stronger person was. Unless, of course, that one enemy has your direct weakness like sonics or loud sounds or fire or something. But that isn't the case with Sleeper and M.O.D.O.K here. Even though M.O.D.O.K's mind is very powerful, Sleeper is eventually able to take control, simply shutting him off and turning him to sleep. But that's not all. Remember Rick Jones' statement about Sleeper's actions being a little bit ethically questionable? Yeah, well, Sleeper here, taking advantage of the situation, uses M.O.D.O.K's mind abilities and telepathy to essentially wipe everybody's mind in the surrounding area of ever seeing any of the symbiotes in battle here. Which even Venom has a problem with this, because in Venom's eyes, this is just going to give the humans more jurisdiction and reason for them to not only hunt the symbiotes, but continue to send them off-world. Which is the whole thing this new SCAR organization is trying to do. Though in the confusion of everything here, we find out that Madame Mask was able to escape. She's the only one whose mind hasn't been wiped and knows of all the other symbiotes' involvement and identity, which will probably come back to harm them later on down the road. Either way though, with the threat taken care of, Venom decides to go home. And here we get to some of the more interesting parts of this entire story, because as this new skinny Venom and weakened version of himself is swinging through the streets of New York, the symbiote goes on to have a little conversation with the host underneath. With it going on to say, let's talk mind to mind for a minute, symbiote to host. Specifically, we find out that this is Venom talking to the host underneath, saying that the goo jet stunt from earlier, that took a lot out of him. He can barely even make a web to swing home, so if they don't get back and rest now, they're just going to collapse. Venom not even having enough energy or power to revert back to the human host underneath and change shapes and colors or whatever. And as they make it to home base, which we find out is an apartment, hopping through a window, they find out that they are not alone as they hear voices. And just with that, we move over back to where we started in the beginning, back at MJ's and Paul's apartment, where we continue to see Rob questioning Paul about everything that's going on and who this new Venom identity might be. Him even being confused and surprised that Dylan's original list had only 4 people on it. Because not only was the trial where the Venom first showed up televised, really the identity of Venom could have been anyone within web swinging distance. Going on to further say that he purposely let Rick Jones and Luke Cage keep thinking that it was one of them who was the Venom symbiote, even when he was starting to suspect the truth. As in, why would Venom even be there at all? When was the last time the symbiote involved itself in non-symbiote business? But not only that day, but it did again and again. It's like it was on patrol, meaning whoever this new host is, whatever this new Venom is doing, they are acting a lot like a standard superhero, one with experience. And because, you know, Robbie started as a reporter, he is well versed in trying to get the truth, uncovering secrets even when it might not look likely, as he went back to every scene and every witness and started getting testimonies, starting with the judge who was at the trial that day, then to some of the SCAR agents who fought Venom at Times Square, and even down to the AIM mercenary Venom fought at the warehouse. And the mercenary even goes on to remember that Venom was there talking to a little child, which of course brings Dylan back into this whole situation, bringing up a couple new lines of thought, such as how did Venom know Dylan was out that night? What is even Dylan's and Venom's relationship now that Eddie Brock is out of the picture completely? But above all else, this just raises one big question among all the others. Why would Venom, you know, whether it be the Venom symbiote or even Eddie Brock himself, let someone else raise his child? The other people in question being Paul and Mary Jane in this case. And this kind of sets Paul off a little bit because from his perspective and what we know, he is essentially left in the dark about everything that's going on. He knows nothing about this new Venom, why Dylan was entrusted to them by Flash Thompson, what even happened to Eddie Brock, nor what is MJ hiding from him and everybody else. He just went along with everything, you know, taking Dylan Brock in because he didn't have a home and Flash trusted MJ, so he thought it was all good. But slowly, Robbie starts to unveil the truth and make Paul put 2 and 2 together, making him realize that all of this was very deliberate. Like, why did Venom abandon Dylan? Or even why Mary Jane just went along with everything. Which, as Paul finally starts to get to the realization, Robbie just goes on to say, "I'm sorry, Paul, you didn't know." As he turns to a mysterious figure now entering the fold, saying, "Which means you chose not to tell him." And this figure is none other than this all-new Venom, which is revealed to be Mary Jane herself, saying, "Yeah, Robbie, you hit the jackpot." Finally connecting the dots between everything that's going on. Venom didn't just abandon Dylan, you know. Instead, Dylan was entrusted to Mary Jane, and Paul here, with Venom still secretly being there watching over Dylan, just, you know, with Mary Jane as his new host. And like I said at the beginning, I, for one, don't really hate this idea. I know a lot of people say this doesn't make sense. You know, MJ hated Venom and all the other symbiotes. Which sure, she might have at one point in time, but Venom himself isn't the same as he has been before. He started out as a villain, always trying to kill not only Peter, but even MJ at certain times. Yet, he has changed over the years, become a hero in his own right, saving not only the world, but the universe. And so I just see it as a natural progression of the story, you know? Mary Jane eventually warming up to the Venom symbiote and seeing that he's not all that bad. And plus, even though this is obviously going to be temporary and isn't going to be a lasting change in the character, I find Mary Jane being Venom way more interesting than I do Mary Jane being Jackpot or another vigilante. But we will see how this further unfolds next time as this issue and video comes to a close. If you have enjoyed, leave a like, or subscribe if you're new and want to see more content just like this. As always, this was AJ here at The Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.